Sewing with Kristene. Today I'm going to show you how to make a pillowcase using the burrito method. This is a common method used by a lot of sewists to make pillowcases, and it's actually quite fun. Hopefully you brought some chips and salsa and maybe a margarita to go along with your burrito today. Let me start out by giving you the dimensions and cuts for the fabric. The first piece that you're going to need is a cuff. The cuff of the pillowcase is cut to 9 inches wide by, let's see, let me measure this one for sure, about 40 to 42 inches long, basically the width of your fabric, depending on how wide your fabric is. Eventually the cuff will end up being folded in half, and you can see it's about the right size, about 4.5 inches wide once it's finished. The body of the pillowcase is also cut the same width. It's going to be 42 inches cut by your width of fabric. And it is about 21 inches long. So this is my cute fabric. Let me show you the right way with cute little dinosaurs on it. I happen to be making this one in particular for donation to a nonprofit called Ryan's Case for Smiles. And I work with a lot of people who make these pillowcases for donation. They go to local hospitals. So it's a really neat program to be involved in. So I have a cute dinosaur print with green and a very cute blue cuff. So I am going to bring you down to my cutting table to show you how to get started, and come and join me. Okay, we're down at my work table now, and I have the cuff piece spread out flat with the right side up. This is probably the part of the process that may feel a little bit strange. If you've never made one of these before, it might feel a little bit strange, but just bear with me and I'll walk you through it step by step. So I have the cuff laid out lengthwise, right side up on my table. Let me move it back here so that you can see. I want you to be able to see this top edge. I'm now going to take the body of my pillowcase, these cute little dinosaurs, and again, I've got it unfolded the long way, so it's 42 inches long on the top of my table here. This is 42 inches long. Notice I am laying the body of my pillowcase right side up on top of the cuff, and I'm matching the top edge, and I'm going to clip it in a few places. Using clips, if you have them, magic clips will be great for this project, because in a minute you'll see how you're going to unclip. And if you pin everything together and then have to unpin it, excuse me, and then have to unpin it, that gets a little bit tiring. So I like to use clips for this project. So again, I have my cuff right side up. I have the body of the pillowcase right side down. So I have my cuff and my pillowcase right sides together. I'm now going to come way down to the bottom of my pillowcase here, and I'm going to roll it up. So this is where I'm making a burrito. The pillowcase is my ground beef or chicken spiced meat, and I'm rolling it up right in the middle of my cuff, which is like my tortilla. Now I'm going to simply take my cuff and I'm going to roll it on top, just like I'm rolling up a burrito, and I'm going to match the bottom edge of the cuff up here with the top here. So I've made a little burrito sandwich. I have a layer of cuff fabric right side up. I have a layer of pillowcase fabric, one layer of pillowcase fabric right sides down, and now I've rolled the cuff over, and I now have a layer of cuff fabric right sides down as well. And I'm going to clip that in here. So as I'm moving down the pillowcase, I'm going to unclip and reclip. And just to make sure you've got it right, I have 3 layers of fabric clipped together here. Let me show you here. 3 layers of fabric. The layer of pillowcase right side up. The layer of cuff fabric right side up. The layer of pillowcase fabric right side down. And the second layer of cuff fabric right sides down. And I have this nice, fun little burrito here. Burrito? I don't know the right definition. And I have a long piece here. It's going the long way across the top of the pillowcase. So now we're going to take this and sew as straight a seam as possible. I would sew about a 1/2 inch seam along the top edge, removing the clips as I go. And when I come back from my sewing machine, I will show you the seam that I have across the top. I'm gonna go sew and I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back from my sewing machine and I have my burrito, man, it's a big burrito, all sewn together. I sewed about a 1/2 inch seam right along the top here, as you can see. And now comes the fun part. And when I do this project with youngsters, students and children, they find this part to be the most fun. You're basically going to pull out the filling. You're gonna pull all of that burrito filling, your cheese, you're gonna pull it all out of the middle. This, like I said, could perhaps be the fun part, and it's gonna feel a little bit odd to you. You're gonna be like, what is happening here? But I'm gonna pull this out. And as I'm pulling, I'm also going to let you know that you probably didn't know this when you tuned in for today's little tutorial, but you're also going to learn how to make what's called a French seam in a couple of minutes. And you can impress all of your sewing friends by letting them know that you know how to make a French seam. So we'll talk about that in a minute. So here I pulled out my pillowcase, and magically you can see there is a cuff at the top of it. And if I pull it up, I'm gonna pull my camera up here so that you can see a little bit better. Hello. Hello, hello, hello. Voila! I have a cuff at the top of my pillowcase. You can see it's still one flat piece of fabric, but soon that's going to change and we're going to learn a French seam. So along the top here, along this top edge, I like to top stitch because I top stitch everything. So I'm going to go to my machine for a quick minute and I'm going to top stitch about, as an 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch on the blue fabric. I'm gonna have some white thread showing up on the blue fabric there for you. And I'm back from doing my top stitching on the top here. So you can see I've top stitched along, made a little bit wider than I intended, but it looks fine. I like it with the top stitching on it. One of the things I like to do on Sewing with Kristene is to show you the reality of how things actually turn out. We like to think that we do everything perfect, but when you're working with fabric, as I tell everybody all the time, this is more of an art than a science, and things don't always fit together exactly the way you intended. So it could be likely that the edge of your cuff turned out to be a little bit wider than the edge of your actual pillowcase here, the body of the pillowcase. This can happen because the cuff isn't cut evenly. It can happen just because of the way that you sewed it on. Perfectly fine just to trim that off, trim it even. So that's what I'm going to do right now, is I'm just gonna trim the cuff even with the side body of the pillowcase so that they are even. There you go. The other side turned out pretty even, so I didn't need to do that. So the next step is all about this French seam. Particularly for us, we donate these, as I said, to an organization that gives them to children that are in the hospital. It's nice for them to have a bright colored pillowcase instead of a standard issue white hospital pillowcase. And they like all the seams to be finished, so much like you might buy a garment where the inside, the edges of the seams are all finished and enclosed and encased. That's what they like to have in the hospital. They don't want all the threads flying all over. So a French seam allows you on the inside of the pillowcase to not have the edges, the raw edges of the seam with the fraying threads showing. So that's what we're going to learn how to do. And again, for those of you who have sewn for a while, it'll feel a little strange. Just bear with me, and I think you'll be able to get a good idea of what we're doing. So we are going to put our pillowcase, now that it has the cuff attached, all attached to it, we are going to fold it together, wrong sides together. Wrong sides together. Normally we sew with right sides together, and we'll get there in a minute, but for right now we're going to sew wrong sides together. And we are going to go ahead and clip this. So I am going to put clips all down the edges, if you'll bear with me for just a minute, all down the side edge. If your pillowcase was cut so that it was not on a fold, sometimes people end up using 2 pieces of fabric. Okay, we'll cut that part out. You're going to want to pin or clip all the way down the side of your pillowcase and then across the bottom as well. So I've got all down the sides I've got clipped. Now I'm going to the bottom. And what I want to do now that I have this all clipped together is I'm going to go to my sewing machine and I'm going to sew a seam right down following where my clips are. This seam I want to make as small as I can, so about 1/4 inch. I want it to be a relatively small seam. Don't go down to 1/8 of an inch. 1/4 inch would be fine. If you're a quilter, you'll be very familiar with that, but 1/4 inch seam. More important than how wide the seam is that it's straight. If your seam ends up to be a little bit wider than 1/4 inch, that's okay. Go ahead and trim it down to 1/4 inch before the next step. So if you're following along with me, go along to your sewing machine, sew 1/4 inch. If your seam ends up to be a little bit wider than that, trim it down to 1/4 inch, and then meet me back here. So welcome back. Hopefully you got your pillowcase sewn together, right sides together. I have mine sewn together with about 1/4 inch seam. I did go along and clip off a lot of the threads that were raveling off. So you may want to do that as well if you haven't already. Just clip those threads off. So it's sewn together. It's got a folded edge on one side, sewn together on the bottom and the other side. Starting to look pretty good, isn't it? Now we wouldn't want to give a pillowcase to anybody with raw edges out like that. So here comes the next step of making a French seam. Turn your pillowcase inside out. Turn it inside out. Get your corners nice and square. You may have a little plastic tool that you can use to do that. To get your corners nice and square here. Push them out. Let's see. Here you go. I'm going to step away for just a second, get my little tool here. Here it is. I have a little handy dandy thingamabobby tool. Mine's pink. Some of yours might be purple. They come in all different colors. I'm going to push those corners out. Now I have my pillowcase inside out. I don't think we want to give it to anyone inside out either. So your next and final step, you didn't know this was going to be as easy as it was, did you? Is to take the edge where the seam is. So here's the side where the seam is. Fold that together. You may want to give it a quick pressing at this point. Take your clips and clip those edges together with the seam right on the edge. So I'm going to clip them together. And then what I'm going to do is now, where I sewed with 1/4 inch seam the last time, I want to encapsulate those raw edges in. So this time I'm going to sew with somewhere between 1/2 inch, maybe 5/8 of an inch seam. And I'm going to sew right down exactly where I sewed before, all the way down the side and the bottom. And what that's going to do is encapsulate the little raw edges inside of a seam. And when you come back, you'll have a nice, crisp and clean seam with no raw edges sewing, and your pillowcase will be ready to put on your bed or to donate if that's what you're doing. So again, it's really important that you want to clip or pin those, pin that, you may want to iron it. Ironing it would probably help you. But get that seam right on the edge and then clip or pin it together to make sure that it stays there while you're sewing. You want to keep this as straight as possible to make it a nice professional looking seam. So make sure that you do that. And if you're following along, go onto your sewing machine and meet me back here, and we'll undo and we'll turn it right sides out and take a look at what we have. See you soon. And welcome back. We're about to unveil the final pillowcase. Here is mine. I've got a couple threads to cut there, but you can see where I have sewn another seam right along the edge. So I've got the edges together and I've sewn another seam about a little over, I did mine closer to 5/8 of an inch probably, so that all of my seams inside are encapsulated inside of there. My cuff, the two edges of my cuff match up pretty well there. So I was proud of that. And I'm turning it right sides out, and we'll be able to see the finished project, and hopefully you're turning yours right side out now as well, so that you can see the finished project. And there you have it, a pillowcase. Great, kids would love these. You could make fancy, pretty ones that coordinate with your bedding for your bedroom, for your guest bedroom, all kinds of things that you can do with these. There's lots of ways that you can embellish the pillowcases as well. I have a friend who makes pillowcases every Christmas and puts gifts in them for her grandkids. So you could get some Christmas fabric, make them Christmas pillowcases and put their gifts inside. You can also add a small piece of piping between the cuff and the pillowcase before you attach that cuff on to begin with at the beginning step with the burrito rolling. Before you do that, put a piece of piping in there as well. That makes it a real professional looking pillowcase at that point. You can embroider names on the cuff of the pillowcase or other embroidery patterns if you have an embroidery machine. You could do that either before you add the cuff on, so that the back side of the cuff is still fabric and doesn't show your embroidery on the back side, but you could also do it now. No one's gonna look behind your cuff to see what's there. So you can embroider monograms on there, you could embroider flowers. If you're real creative, maybe in my case, you could embroider a little dinosaur. Anyway, I hope that gives you lots of ideas of how to use these burrito pillowcases, and I hope you had fun making them. It's kind of one of those fun techniques that's just a lot of fun to make and easy, something that you can do with friends as well. If you want to gather with a group of friends and make these, they're easy to do, and you can have a little coffee and chat, or a margarita and some chips and queso. So anyway, thanks for joining us here on Sewing with Kristene today, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye.